Good evening, good morning. Welcome to sunny Edinburgh, and me playing about and forgetting to put my pointer in the right place. So I'm normally on doing all sorts of mad demos with various different borders around it and things like that, but I thought today I might just show you a little bit more of the sort of corporate presentation style that I normally do. So this is the kind of thing that I would normally be presenting. IT 500 is my corporate company and what I'm using for my sort of software business sales, and this is the kind of presentation deck that I would normally have, and I'm quite often in green screen, and I now with the new Zoom will be bringing in some guests to be in an immersive presentation with me, so they're actually part of the presentation and part of my branded world, if you want to put it that way. So this is the kind of thing that I would normally do. If you note, I guess this is just a minor thing really, but I quite like the sort of circles in there for just my incoming Zoom guests, but I don't want to be in the circle presenting. So if you notice here, you can see all my hand movements and gestures and things like that. It's a far more real life experience, whereas if I was just in a circle, then you'd just be seeing me speaking. Even worse, people who do circles which are tiny in the corner of the screen, that's I'd like to call that person in pimple. Complete waste of time, and it really is. You want to get as much of you on the screen as you can, and I sometimes do these standing up as well as an alternative. So the trick here to bring people into the presentation in an immersive way is A, I can bring my Zoom guests and as cameras over the top. B, I'm in there as a camera on green screen. But C is a little trick to do with how I have blended together the presentation deck itself and my background. So let me just reach over and switch off a rectangle in the background. So all I've got here is my screen share sitting in the center of the screen, knowing, because I've positioned myself carefully, that I'm not over the edge of it, but also knowing that my guests are not over the screen share. Why is this important? It means I don't have to change the deck at all. So if somebody's just handed me a deck, and this happens all the time, people change decks on you, and in my world anyway, they say, this is the deck we're using today to present, this is what you've got to use. So I don't get a choice in the matter, but I don't want to go changing that deck or trying to find a space on that deck for my head to sit and at a decent size so as you can see what's going on. So this is one way to do it. So I've got my screen share and I simply drop a rectangle around it that's in the same color as the actual presentation, and I'm good to go. So that's a little tip for the top, just something a little bit different that you can do with a very simple looking presentation in terms of matching things in. So got my little circles there. I suppose I could have everybody sitting in squares if I wanted to have them sitting in squares, but I kind of think the circles kind of a nice look for the guests. But typically what I would be doing in these situations is sitting on something like this, talking with my selected guests, or perhaps they're my team members, and then I'd move into another scene whereby they're still in my branded corporate world, but we're just having a normal Zoom type chat. But instead of just having a chat in a non-branded room, you're now in my branded Zoom room. So I can move back and forth between that and my presentation. I go back to my presentation and I'm back in my presentation mode, and I think I've got some other slides in there as well. I have, but I think I might need to, I don't know. Yeah, that's good. This clicker moves me backwards and forwards within whatever is the active presentation tool. So the active presentation tool there, or the active program there, was Ecamm. I wonder if it'll go back up a scene. Yeah, well, interesting. So the clicker here that I'm just using instead of just the foot pedal is actually moving scenes for me in Ecamm as well, because that's the active program at the time. If I lean forward and I put my mouse onto the keynote screen, then this clicker is going to move forward on the keynote slides instead. So I can go back to showing you all about my next phases of my presentation and whatever it is I'm speaking about here. So just a couple of different ways to look at things really. Now I could put a little bit of motion in the background or something as well if I really wanted to, but I tend not to. This would be how I would generally present. This is the kind of volume of information I have on my slides as well. It could be a complicated network infrastructure diagram or a Gantt chart or something like that, and I will look at ways to sort of zoom in on some of those more complicated elements by bringing in my presentation as a camera, and then in Ecamm choosing different zoom settings within the camera to zoom in on areas of the presentation and see how that works. But generally this would be my corporate world and how things were looking in the corporate world. Finish my presentation, then maybe I go to the next scene, which you've now already seen, but the next scene is me choosing individuals from the gallery, and the reason I bring them in here is that they are a little bit too small for me when they're in the gallery, and the same is true for earlier in the presentation as well. I really want to see them within the presentation and look at their faces and look at their expressions to see how engaged they are with what I'm saying. So that's why I'd like to bring them in just a little bit bigger here, and we have an active speaker over there, and that's where any active speaker would jump into that box. Now you need to be a little bit careful with muting and unmuting people. If they're all unmuted and they cough, they're going to jump into the active speaker box, and you don't want them coughing or sneezing in the active speaker box. So definitely mute people and tell them to unmute themselves and then come onto the scene if they got a question, or if you see them raise their hand. And that can be anybody from this mini gallery or the larger gallery. Anybody who unmutes themselves and starts talking will jump into the active speaker box. But as I say, watch out for that mute and unmute, and it happens instantly. So if 2 or 3 people are coughing and they're all unmuted, they're all going to jump onto the scene and cough, and that's not going to do anything for your presentation. But here I could be me with a bunch of board members or some team members, or a mixture of customers and team members, or selected people who've wanting to ask questions from the gallery. I can just promote them into those locations during my Zoom meeting and then run it like this. I also had a scene where I had everybody in black and white who wasn't in the active speaker, so when they spoke they would be in colour on the active speaker mode, and they'd be black and white elsewhere on the screen. So anyway, that's a few different things. That's my corporate world in Edinburgh. Cheerio. Oh, got to find the off switch. It's in there somewhere. Ending record.